Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for another edition of Adam Interviews. You may have seen yesterday, I did a pretty amazing story. I mean, the story was great, not because I did it, because the story itself was amazing. A 911 dispatcher in Wayne County suffered a cardiac arrest while on the job within the Wayne County 911 center, and a coworker noticed it. Another one came over. He was an EMT on the side, recognized what was happening, got her on the ground, started CPR. Another person ran, grabbed the AED, and they were able to keep her alive until the paramedics got there. They took her to the hospital. She remained alive. And we didn't do the story at first because we were told that she likely wouldn't survive. She was on life support for 2.5 weeks and then finally came off of that and is now recovering. I interviewed her. If you want to check it out, you can go on rochesterfirst.com. And this got me thinking, the power of CPR, the power of an AED is just so incredible that I wanted to make sure that we explored that further. And if you wanted to, you can learn about it and also learn where you can get trained, where you can get your office trained if you work in an office, family members, all that. To help me do that is Dr. Scott Feitel from Rochester Regional Health, Director of Heart Failure, and you hold many other titles. But thank you so much for joining us.
Sure, thanks for having me.
All right, so you just heard the story that I told. The one thing I noted to Todd Spears, the 911 dispatcher, is what he did, anybody can do.
Absolutely, that you do not need to be a doctor, don't need to be a nurse, an APP, a technician. Anybody can learn the basics and save a life. It's really that amazing.
So why don't we talk about, before we get into how you can learn it, what is CPR? Like, what does it actually do to the body?
Sure. So I think the most important thing is to highlight what CPR is for first. So CPR is cardiac pulmonary resuscitation. And it's when someone suffers from a sudden cardiac death, when their heart has stopped pumping blood to reach the brain and other vital organs. And so CPR is something that we can immediately do to sustain blood flow to the brain, essentially. At the core, that's what we're trying to achieve, is get just enough oxygen up to the brain until other measures can be taken to save a life.
How long do you generally have before some permanent damage starts to set in?
Yeah, so that's the huge challenge when we talk about this, is you really have seconds to minutes. For every minute that you delay resuscitating the patient or the person and restoring blood flow to the brain, the risk of anoxic brain injury or brain death climbs exponentially. So you really have a matter of minutes to take action.
We obviously saw the Damar Hamlin incident.
Sure.
And I think that for a lot of people that turn them on, we've known for years and decades the power of CPR, but that really turned, and we've seen movements and programs because of that. And your thoughts on post-Damar Hamlin, what society has been like towards this procedure?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, thankfully we have a good outcome. The Bills are 4-0. I mean, we're firing on all cylinders. But Damar Hamlin is the example I use every time I can because so many people were actually watching that on live TV. It's one of those moments where you can kind of remember where you were when you were watching that game, much like many other things in history tied to television. So it hits home for patients when I explain in the office when we're talking about things that they can do with their family members. When I give talks to folks like you, or when I give talks in the community, I always harken back to Damar Hamlin because everybody can relate to that and see what the effects of CPR really were in real time. And he's still playing football. I mean, he made a full recovery. The sad state of affairs is that's the minority. He happened to be in the right place at the right time. The overwhelming majority of people are not so fortunate. Upwards of 90% of patients that suffer an out-of-hospital cardiac arrest end up dying. They don't get CPR in enough time.
And I was reading RRH, the representatives there in preparation for this interview, sent me an article. RRH has been working hand in hand with the American Heart Association to get people trained. And one thing they said is most of these happen in the home.
Correct.
So, it's not just, it's your office mate. You could save your wife's life, your husband's life, your child's life.
100%. One of the first things I made my wife do when she became a new mom is actually she went to the firehouse where we lived at the time to get trained in CPR because she was a lay person. She has no medical expertise or background. I said, if we're going to have a kid in the house, you have to learn. And she did it willingly. And I encourage that to all new parents. Take that opportunity to go get learned. There are different techniques for children and babies as there are for adults. But the overall, any decent course will show you the basics and give you just enough skills to really save a life.
Here's where I would get worried. I wouldn't know what was happening. How do I know that they're in cardiac arrest? I know how to give CPR but I don't want to hurt them either.
Sure. Generally speaking, if someone is completely not responsive, there are many places where you can feel for a pulse. You're taught oftentimes the wrist, you can feel for the carotids. If you truly can't feel anything, if you're shaking them and they're not awakening, and you don't see any breath sounds, if you put your ear to their mouth and you don't feel any breath coming out, those are all pretty good indications that someone's unresponsive and does not have a pulse. We joke about if you're giving CPR to someone who doesn't need it, they're going to slap you across the face and say, stop it. So if they're not responding to you, they're not moving, and the odds are they probably are having a sudden event and probably would benefit from it.
Do you end up breaking the sternum when you do that?
Great question. So there are some deleterious side effects. You can break ribs. Sternum would be a bit much, but you can certainly fracture some ribs. I myself have done that, unfortunately. When you do CPR, good CPR probably will break a few ribs because you really want to make sure you're compressing the heart enough to get blood flow to the brain. I tell patients when we're lucky enough to get survivors, if the fact that you walk away with a few broken ribs, consider yourself lucky, not to make light of it and it hurts and such. But the reality is good CPR may break a rib or two, but if the alternative is death, then we accept that.
All right, so we have an AED, I think 20 feet outside the newsroom here at News 8. If someone were to go into cardiac arrest and you're going to get them zapped in a minute and a half, should you still perform CPR within that short time frame?
100%. Even in many cases, AEDs may not be readily available. It may take a second for someone to look at the instruction sheet or figure out where the stickers go, what have you. Time is brain tissue. So literally every second that you're not performing CPR while you're delaying care is time that the brain is not getting oxygen. So as a general rule of thumb, we always encourage everyone, whether you're taught through the AHA, when you come to my office, wherever we're talking about it, do the CPR, do the chest compressions, focus all of your energy on that. If and when an AED becomes available and there's comfort in using it, then by all means use it, because AEDs certainly do save lives. But don't delay chest compressions while you're waiting for someone down the hall to go find it, unzip the package, get the stickers out. Even though it can be done quickly, those few seconds can be very vital for the patient.
When I learned CPR for the first time in health class in the 90s, there was also the breath. So it was pump, 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 like 5 pumps, and then I can't remember the exact number, and I don't want to give it because you don't do it anymore.
Correct.
What happened to the breath?
Yeah, so there's the AHA sponsors, millions of dollars of research, and what we have found is that you actually have enough oxygen reserves throughout your system that you can go a little bit longer. Even when someone's not breathing, if you put a pulse oximeter on them and measure their oxygen levels, it takes a really long time for it to drop off. So you have much more time just circulating the blood rather than worrying about giving those two breaths to get fresh oxygen. The venous return and the arterial send out has a couple of minutes, maybe even a little bit longer than that in terms of oxygen reserves for your body. So all the emphasis is really on making sure the blood gets to where it's going and letting the brain extract the oxygen as it gets it.
Before you go into cardiac arrest, are there sometimes signs that you can be aware of so you can put yourself in a position where you might get help faster?
Sure. Yeah, that's a great question. And that's really the challenge with this diagnosis and why the mortality is so high. There really oftentimes aren't signs. One of the misnomers or the challenges with nomenclature is people equate heart attacks with sudden cardiac death. They are not always the same. Plenty of patients have heart attacks that don't suffer from sudden death, and plenty of patients have sudden death that never had a heart attack. So certainly if you have the classic symptoms of chest pain, trouble breathing, all of those things that go with it, seeking immediate medical attention may save your life. Before we had cath labs and interventions and bypass surgeries, many patients with heart attacks did die of sudden death, going back 50 years. But a sizable percentage of sudden death are either have no signs of heart attack, or the heart attack and the sudden death is occurring at the exact same moment. So really the amount of warning you get is very minimal. And so, a lot of times, unfortunately, they're unprecipitated. We don't know what caused them, and patients get no warning signs. They literally just collapse.
That's obviously incredibly scary. Do you think that there's ever going to be technology in, the wristwatch where they're
Sure.
going to be able to detect some of this? Not to get too off field here, but
right. No. I got into this field. I'm a heart failure specialist by training. I got into it because I'm a futurist. I always believe the future is going to hold greater good than what we have now. Absolutely. It's hard to look at this Apple Watch and things that patients come to me with that we didn't have 5 or 10 years ago. There's no reason not to think that we may develop sensors and other metrics that we can use to perhaps predict at a greater likelihood. We're learning more and more about genetics. We actually in our office now have a full-time genetics counselor dedicated just to looking at rare genetic disorders.
Wow.
And many of those can be linked to sudden death. So I think we're getting there, but we still have a ways to go.
I meant to say far afield, not off field.
Correct.
I like my expressions, and I like to get them right. American Heart Association, we noted that RRH has partnered with them. A lot of that is going into schools, Palmyra Macedon, if I'm not mistaken, and talking about kits that you're getting in front of kids. What are those kits?
Right. Really to teach the basics of doing CPR, learning what chest compressions are and how to time them, how much effort to put into them, when is it appropriate, some basics about feeling for a pulse and assessing someone who may have collapsed. And then also educating on the use of AEDs, particularly in high school sports. One of the other, everybody thinks about older folks with heart attacks. The other population thinking of Damar Hamlin is young athletes that may not know they're pre-exposed to disease, may not know their full family history, or may have never had any signs of it. If mom and dad were couch potatoes, but now all of a sudden you be turned into a football player, you may not know those risks and how they relate to your activity. So making sure at the high school level that students know not only about themselves, but also for their teammates, things that they can do to perhaps save a life is critical.
Where can people go if they want to get trained? I mean, you mentioned that you sent your wife to the local fire department. Is that one option still?
Yeah, absolutely. Most local firehouses and EMS centers provide training. The American Heart Association has a whole list of resources and places that patients can go and their families. Many of these places offer free things. A lot of times at fairs and other places you'll see training. I know at Red Wings games they offer training at certain games. So there's numerous avenues where patients can get it for oftentimes for free or a nominal fee, but it's well worth it.
And the response from that, the actual result, the probability of survival and recovery just go up tremendous. It's like almost a straight line.
The very first question I ask when we have a sudden cardiac death that arrives to our ER or to our ICU, I try to get a hold of family or friends or whoever was present, and I said, was bystander CPR administered, and how much time elapsed between, because I automatically know that is a direct predictor of what the outcome of the case is going to be. I am not God, I do not know everything, but oftentimes we are correct. When bystander CPR is administered and it's administered in a timely fashion, we can almost always guarantee that the outcome will be significantly better than patients that were either found down for an unknown period of time or no one administered CPR. We already know that that patient's behind the 8 ball, unfortunately.
It almost makes me want to cry because it is so easy in concept.
Correct.
So, Dr. Feitel, thank you so much for joining us. We will have you back. I think we're going to make this a regular thing because it's just so important, and it can truly save a life, not just outside of your home, but inside your home as well.
100%. Happy to come back and share as much information as needed because it is such a critical area that we can make such an impact on.
All right, Dr. Scott Feitel from Rochester Regional Health joining us. We are so grateful for his time. I hope that you listen, but I also hope that you take the information you heard and spread it around to those you know, because you never know when this is going to happen and when it could be needed. When we come back, we're going to hear from a doctor from URMC. We're going to talk more about the AEDs, how expensive they are, how they're used, and what they actually do. Stay with us. Welcome back, everybody. As promised, we are back with yet more on the importance of CPR and an AED. We just got done talking with Dr. Scott Feitel over at RRH. Joining me now from the Golisano Children's Hospital, we have Dr. Justin Smith. And I want to thank you so much for taking time out of what is obviously a very busy day to come and talk to us.
Well, I appreciate you having me. Thanks for having me here.
Of course. So we talked quite a bit about CPR, and I'm wondering if a lot of people might think this is going to be older adults. Here you are with the Golisano Children's Hospital. Can a child have a cardiac arrest?
Yeah, it's a really great question. We know that the communities that cardiac arrest affects people in the community all across the United States, and it affects people of all ages. I mean, you probably had some of the statistics on your program already, but there's about 350,000 people who experience a cardiac arrest each year, and over 7,000 of those people that experience cardiac arrest in the U.S. are children. There's a big push in the local community focusing on CPR and kind of cardiac arrest preparedness with kind of an emphasis in the pediatric population placed on schools and what we're kind of doing in schools to be prepared and have our community heart safe and ready to manage these patients.
One thing I brought up before is I think I would absolutely do CPR. I know how to do it, and I would do it in a pinch. I'm always worried about hurting the person, especially if it were a kid. Do you have to do it differently with children?
Yeah, I think the most important things that we can teach people about CPR is early CPR. Every second saves lives. CPR training is important, and it's a really big kind of key cornerstone of what we're trying to do from a public health and safety standpoint in our community. The outcome of giving CPR to a pediatric patient or an adult patient is going to be better if you've done something than if you've done nothing. And so I think, there's a lot of folks that are worried about injuring someone or hurting someone with CPR, and the messaging that we can give you is doing something is better than doing nothing. The way that you're going to help that person is so much more than any potential you have for hurting that patient.
Absolutely. And speaking of, I think a lot of people, including myself at times, worried about the AED. I mean, that's a pretty powerful zap, but as I've come to learn, it won't do it unless it's necessary. It's kind of built in, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. The AEDs are really amazing devices, and we're really fortunate to be able to have them becoming more widespread in our community and having more access to them for our kind of people that are first there at a scene of an event. And the device it's got a lot of instructions. They're designed to be pretty user friendly. It's really intimidating. I remember, during early on in my training when I was kind of learning to use a defibrillator and AEDs, it was intimidating for me, even in medicine early on. But I think as you kind of come to see them and see how they're functional and practice, they're designed to be really user friendly. They're designed to kind of take you through stepwise exactly where to apply pads, exactly what to do. It'll do all the analysis of the patient's heart rhythm and interpret whether or not it needs to deliver a shock.
How much are they generally these days?
Yeah, they're in the range of thousands of dollars. I think there's a lot of grant funding and community resources available to try and provide funding to allow like community organizations and things like that to purchase their own.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Look, I'm not going to lie. We invested one for our own household because we thought, maybe if we don't maybe go that extra few nights of the vacation, but we have that for forever, for years to come. So I just feel safer with it around, given that it can be the difference between living and not living. So.
Yeah, it's like I said, it's a really important resource, and I think we're in a really exciting period for the county, Monroe County, and for the city of Rochester with this Heart Safe Community Initiative, and a part of that initiative is really trying to one, kind of build up the community of people who are CPR trained, but two, also build up a community where there's awareness about where AEDs are, whether that's in a private home, in a school, in a community organization, a church, a library, so that the dispatchers for the emergency response system can recognize where there's an AED available and direct people who call into 911 to get that AED and use it as soon as possible.
And URMC, University of Rochester Medical Center, Golisano, they're doing their part by promoting the Heart Safe community, trying to get us that designation in our area. What does that mean?
Yeah, so what it means is that there's kind of a 13-step plan that looks at multiple different aspects of our community kind of readiness to manage a person who's had a cardiac arrest. There's some component that relates to our first responders, our fire departments, our police departments, our ambulance EMS systems. There's some components that focus on that school piece, and are our schools kind of heart safe and ready to manage a child or an adult that has a cardiac arrest in that setting. And then there's some component of CPR training and education. So there's multiple aspects, and the certification is through the American Heart Association. And I'm sure that there's going to be lots of news updates and stories through the city about the initiative as it rolls out. And we're really kind of in the early phases of figuring out what our implementation plan is. But thankfully in our community, we've got a lot of really great people who are already doing great work. So we're already kind of ahead of the game with how close we are to getting that achievement.
And perhaps through that, you already have surveys and data, but I'm just wondering, even if it's just anecdotally, where you think we are as a community when it comes to outreach and education.
Yeah, I think we're doing a great job. The people in this community who have been doing this for long before the Heart Safe Community Initiative has happened have been doing really great work. Our police departments, our fire departments, our ambulance systems, our hospital systems like Rochester Regional and University of Rochester, Golisano, are out in the community doing education, and we've got a big step up and being ready to kind of move forward with this certification.
No, I'm looking forward to seeing that, and feel free to reach out to us to promote whatever we have to. Have you ever had to perform CPR or administer an AED outside of the job, like just in the public? I'm just curious if you were ever called upon to do that out in the public.
I have not had that experience, and I know that there are some of my colleagues who have, and it's, it's a stressful situation inside the hospital and outside the hospital, right? They're totally different environments, but stressful in different ways. And I think the stress that a lot of people feel is that you're there in a critical situation and doing your best to save somebody's life. And every step that you can take is an important one, and every second counts.
Are there any other types of training, any other devices or anything that can help in a situation like that besides CPR and an AED?
I think the CPR and AED are really the most important first steps. We have multiple areas and avenues for CPR training in the community, and the Heart Safe Community Initiative through the City of Rochester website has links to those resources. There's some through the AHA and University of Rochester. There's some through the Red Cross, and there's several organizations that have that type of training. And I think training, the knowledge, and the willingness to kind of jump in and be a first responder before EMS is able to get there is critical, and getting the AED applied and following its instructions is critical.
And we've seen the movement to especially get AEDs within schools. We've seen kids, sometimes we just don't think it can happen to a kid, but to have it there is just so important. And we're seeing it more and more in schools. Do you find from your outreach that it's in almost every school that you go in now?
Yeah, it's been New York State law. Fortunately, living in New York, it's been New York State law for almost 20 years now. I think back in 2002 is when the law requiring AEDs in schools was kind of established. More recently, the focus, and just this summer, Governor Hochul had passed legislation about having a cardiac emergency response plan in schools, and that's kind of our new push. That really we recognize that having the AED and having people that are CPR trained is great, but it's not always enough. We really need to have a plan of action when this kind of event happens. What are we going to do to respond? How are we going to have the people right there at the child's or adults kind of side to deliver the care that they need. And so the focus right now, I think AEDs seems like we're in a really good spot with that and access to them, but having a plan of who's going to use it, who's going to get it, who's going to be there doing CPR, and how are we going to get that child to the next place that they need to be.
And a silly question, but I think it's important. If you get someone with an AED, you restart their heart, CPR stops at that point, right? Or what else do you need to do after the AED does its thing?
Yeah, the AED is great that it'll kind of prompt you. It'll deliver shock. The first thing that we'll do after it delivers a shock is resume CPR. That changing that life-threatening rhythm can save a patient's life, but it doesn't always mean that they're out of a cardiac arrest. And resuming CPR is really the next best step. The times that we would talk about stopping CPR is if someone wakes up, and that can be a really scary thing to have somebody jump up and wake up, but that's a fantastic thing that you just saved their life.
Okay, so that's I'm glad maybe it wasn't a silly question then. So even if you were able to get their heart rate back, so to speak, if they're still unconscious, the CPR usually has to continue?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, but you're saying the AED will actually prompt you and tell you what to do at that point.
Yeah,
well, that's good.
Yeah.
When you get someone in the hospital and they're still alive after cardiac arrest, do you almost always assume that there was some type of some Good Samaritan or bystander intervention?
We actually have some information about this. In our community, there's about a third of the events have a bystander do CPR before EMS gets there. Of course, when EMS gets there, yeah, it's pretty good, but definitely a lot of area for improvement there. Of course, I think the national average is around 40% of events have bystanders doing CPR. In other countries where they've had a lot of really big focus on bystander CPR, there are bystander CPR rates as high as 80%. So there's a lot of room for us to improve, and it's really important because we know people who get bystander CPR have 2 or 3 times higher likelihood of surviving their event, and so it's really important. Every second, every minute counts, even in places where EMS is going to be there very quickly. It can make a huge difference, and we see that on the receiving end. Patients who have had CPR right away and bystander CPR have a much different hospital course and much different recovery than those who haven't.
Yeah. By the way, if someone wants to get involved in the Heart Safe community project that we are now in, can they? Is this something that a layman can help out with?
Yeah, I think the ways that you can help are finding places to be CPR trained. And if you're a part of a community organization and interested in getting your community group trained, there's a registration form or kind of a notification form through the city website that you can fill out some information and let the city know, so we can kind of count that in our numbers. Those are probably the most helpful ways to start. Definitely reaching out to the city directly to kind of ask about ways to be involved are really helpful.
Do you have to be retrained at all? I mean, is this a yearly thing or every 2 years? What do you recommend to just refresh the skills?
Yeah, I think getting trained initially is really important for sure. These are skills that you forget about, right? You do it once, and then there's a period of time that hopefully you never have to use it.
Yeah.
And the things that you forget. And so I think in the hospital setting, we do quarterly skills updates. Every couple of months, we're doing skills updates. Of course, it's really critical that we know that and are very sharp on our skills. But I think for the community, thinking about doing something on an ongoing basis, whatever that is and whatever that works for you, is an important thing.
Anything else that you'd like to add? Any other message before we take off here?
No, I think I'm really appreciative to be here and be talking with you. I'm appreciative that we have a community that's interested in this and interested in having news stories about this kind of thing. This is really important stuff that saves people's lives. Every second counts. Getting people that are there witnessing anyone have an event that to know that they can make a difference is really important. So thanks.
And the training isn't that long, right, to get trained?
Right. Yeah, there's several online trainings. I think the in-person hands-on trainings are really helpful too. There's access to hands-only CPR mannequins actually through our public library system, which are fantastic, and that's a resource that you can check out at a library with some educational things. So there's both paid for, free, in-person, online resources that are all wonderful.
All right, Dr. Justin Smith, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
All right, that's Dr. Smith from the Golisano Children's Hospital. Incredible advice, and you may think to yourself, I'll never have to use it. Well, probably everyone did until it happens to them, and what a gift you can give someone by being able to save their life, and that's exactly what CPR training and the use of an AED can do. So I want to thank Dr. Feitel and Dr. Smith for lending us their expertise, and not just their expertise, their motivation, their inspiration, if you will, so we can become the lifesavers out there and make sure that they are still alive, so the folks like Dr. Smith and Dr. Feitel can take it from there. And we look forward to seeing what's going to be happening with the Heart Safe Community Initiative, the effort, and we will continue to report on that right here on News 8. Thank you so much for joining us, everyone. Take care.
Get the Rochester First streaming app today for everything you love from News 8 On Demand, plus exclusive shows you won't see anywhere else. Search ROC and download for free on Roku, Amazon Fire, and Apple TV.